Welcome back to Geek Judge's second episode. Thank you for all your comments on the Geek Judge first episode. Without much ado, let's jump into the new episode this one. Baba, let's start with you. Bala, what are the three things from last week that you think is important for you?
Thank you. It was great to see all the people's warm welcome. The first one I had was Samsung. We never, I thought Samsung is done. It's just done with it's a phone only thing. But I think HBM is the new GPU. They are shipping HBM4 right now. So it's your territory, of course, hardware. But I'm excited about this. It's good to have multiple players, not just NVIDIA and everyone else is following through. But I think this will be a real shaker. The second important thing I saw was once again the security. What happened over last week is there is this tool or there is the GitHub tool called Heretic, which strips away everything from all the weights from the open source models and big LLMs. So just a few minutes, everything started responding about bioweapons, malware, and whatever obnoxious thing you could think of that was happening with Tay, if you remember 2016. And always follow the money, right? So Dell's earnings is really saying there is an AI infrastructure boom. It is real. It is getting transformed into earnings. It is getting transformed into profits. So those were my three big takeaways from this week. What about you, Dinesh? What are the three big or four if you want to do one more?
Yeah, sure. I can actually add four. So thanks for being lenient on that. So my big one this week was the Anthropic valuation, right? So we know that OpenAI has been hitting close to like $1 trillion valuation whenever their IPO is going to be released, right? But like Anthropic actually kind of like exceeded their valuation this year with this round of investment. They got a 65 billion funding right now, which kind of values them around like 950 to $1 trillion valuation. So that's a big news because Anthropic was kind of considered as a number two or even like a number distance 3 and 4 after Google and rest of the companies, right? So now they are overtaking OpenAI is a big news for me, right? And the second one I thought was like the coding agent. Everyone is talking about Devin, and Devin says that they had written 90% of Devin's code is written by Devin itself, right? It's like self-writing itself. So that is something that we can deep dive today. That's something like I was really fascinated about and also worried about at the same time. So let's talk about that. The third one I really liked is the NVIDIA's $150 billion Taiwan bet, right? So they are saying that now NVIDIA says that they are going to invest around 150 billion a year with Taiwan for chip making and other supply chain activities. So we'll delve into that one as well right now because only a few months back, Anson, when he went with the US presidents and the rest of the people, he said that he said like he's going to invest more in US. But this comes as a surprise, and not a surprise because there's no other way that NVIDIA can fulfill the supply needs for all these AI companies. And the last one is kind of like which I want to say if whether we're going to cover or not is like Pope's call for disarming AI. So that's a very very interesting term, like disarming AI, because we had been always talking about AI as a kind of a nuclear arsenal or a nuclear capability. So what does he mean by disarming AI? So we can go into those things. So those are the four topics that we spoke about. But
Thank you, Dinesh.
Yeah.
Exciting topics. I'll start with the tough questions. So Anthropic, OpenAI, SpaceX, everybody is exceeding $1 trillion valuation, as you just said. $1 trillion is a lot of, it's big money. So how do you see the IPO game being played out in the next 12 months, 24 months? What would be impact for a common person who is investing in stock market, who is worried about 401k, who is doing some options trading? Not me, but me. So talk about the AI ecosystem, the public markets, venture capital. We have seen .com boom personally. How do you see this playing out for the
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like, in the late 90s and like in early 2000, right? Getting a $1 billion funding used to be a big issue, right? Now all these open AI companies, like, only a couple of months back, OpenAI got like 120 billion plus funding. Now Anthropic is beating that with like 65 billion dollar funding, right? So what it means is that the funding is based on your revenue, right? So that's a good thing, right? So every time when you're talking about AI, we do not have what is the revenue number, right? Is the valuation of the company, does it match with the revenue they're generating? And Anthropic says that yes, they match it. They actually beat it. They showed around like $47 billion in revenue, additional revenue. So from a valuation perspective, that is in the right track. But if we compare it with other we used to call as brick and mortar. So now we can call AI versus non-AI technology companies, right? So the non-AI technology companies, like if they are going to get only 47 billion in revenue, it's very impossible for them to get $65 billion in funding, right? But from an AI perspective, this they require a massive amount of funding that the amount of money they need to spend to keep this place, right? That's one thing. Second thing is the company Anthropic as a company is gaining corporate recognition, is what I say. Like, more accepted into this area where, like, they are considered as, like, a front runner for some of their AI businesses. So those are, like, positive points. The negative thing is, like, again, a person who has seen through and lived through the dot-com burst and also the financial collapse in the 2008, it kind of worries me. I think probably you would probably share the same sentiment as mine, right? So with this big valuation, what it means is that the pressure for these companies to show additional revenue is going to be very high. But I know that $47 billion is big money. They were able to show that revenue, but is it sustainable is a big question, right? How many of these companies will be able to provide so much of money is not something that I'm very sure of.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, how do you see the coalitions? Like, I think everybody is behind NVIDIA, as just Hansen said in his conference. Uh, and recently, Micron, Samsung, SK Hynix has started strategic infrastructure as infrastructure partners. So, how do you see this playing out in CPUs, the HBM thing, which I just talked about, data centers, semiconductor manufacturing?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? So whatever money they got in this funding, they immediately announced like partnership with buying chips into infrastructure. They have to reinvest that into those kind of stuff, right? It's not like, this is a very interesting time where they cannot take the profit, right? So, I mean, they're still growing. The price of data centers, the price of chips is going up. Supply is kind of like, getting tighter. So whatever money they get, they need to keep on reinvesting it back into into, like, making it better. That's what, like, Anthropic right now did. They got the money, immediately went to, like, invested that in with NVIDIA. They invested a lot with, like, the HBMs, the memory chips that is needed into data centers. Like, at least I think 5 billion or $10 billion was just invested in, like, say, procuring more data center power, right? As the data centers are going, we kind of covered it in multiple places right now. The power is going to be the real money right now, right? So the power needed to run these data centers, and the price to run those chips are going to be very crucial. So that's where Anthropic is investing in it. And then what is interesting is there's also, like, some of the companies that is investing in Anthropic, they are also the primary investors in OpenAI also, right? So you can see the rush, for example, like Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, NVIDIA. Those are the four, like, usual culprits. Like, they usually, like, invest in all these kind of companies, right? What is important thing that we had seen in Anthropic is that companies like Salesforce and Samsung, they are already invested in Anthropic in this particular round. They're already been invested, but now they are increasing that investment again. So that kind of like shows how much of these companies need to coexist, like, because it is kind of like a symbiotic relationship. They need to invest in something. That money has to be refunneled to buy more hardware and more power. So I think, like, the overall they will grow together.
Awesome, awesome. So let's switch gears from Anthropic to another one of their favorite tools competitor. They have Cloud Code, of course, their harness. But there are many harnesses around. Of course, we have all heard about Cursor, Windsurf, Replete, Anti-Gravity, Gemini CLI itself, Copilot, etc. So after 25 years of using IDEs and whatnot, is coding done? how do you see the Devin announcement? I see it as oh yeah, 100% of code being written by developers. They had been saying that for quite some time, and it's there. But what is your take on the Devin's big announcement?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the next stage of agentic software, right? We talk about personas, agentic personas being created, right? Non-human agents. So Devin is kind of like moving straight into that area, right? So they what they did, it's created by a company called Cognition Labs. So Devin is a software agent or an AI software engineer, which can write code, not like just provide suggestions. It can take a spec and create end-to-end design, end-to-end implementation, and start implementing it. Right. What they claimed is what is like what is alarming, which is like they say that 90% of Devin's code is written by Devin itself. Right. It's like self-creating itself. Right. It kind of like when you hear about it, it's like a science fiction movie. A villain creating himself. He's like chiseling himself to become. He or she is like trying to chisel themselves to become like a better software engineer. Like if you watch the movie Matrix, it's similar to that one, right? It's self-creating and those kind of things. But again, even if you avoid or like push away the science fiction part of it, what is happening is huge. They got a good funding, round of funding, and again, it's not like multi-billion dollar, multi-hundred-billion-dollars. They got around like $1 billion of funding for this particular round. That values that company around like 26 billion, right? For a simple AI agent company to be valued at $25 billion with that agent by itself is writing its own code is what is alarming to me, right? For example, think about like future agents, right? You can have a, like an attorney agent, you can have a doctor agent which can self-create itself and can value itself and keep adding more value to it. That is the most important part. Kind of worries me. I also looked at like how Devin has been constructed. Like they integrate very well with the VS Code, which we all use, and then like it also has a terminal or a CLI interface as well, and it also has a web browser interface, right? So it's all set to like work as a developer and it's able to support the developers. But I know you also read something about Devin. What's your take on Devin?
Oh, my simple take is as of now is the last 10%. I had been a telecom guy once upon a time during the telecom boom, of course. It shows my age, but the last mile is where the money was, and there were so many players. So 90% is great, but what the heck you are doing with the 10%? But let's switch gears. We are almost running out of time. Let's talk about NVIDIA, our favorite biggest elephant. So they are really, I think that's a great bet because China and US have been really diverging. The stack has been diverging. Their kind of investments, whatever they are doing, Huawei versus US, of course. So it's a important announcement. So how do you see that? And what is this announcement?
Yeah, very good. Like, nah, it's well, like I said, it is kind of surprising too because like only a few months ago, Anson was speaking with the president of the United States, and like he promised that he's going to invest most of his investment is going to be in US, right? That means that all the data centers and all the chip manufacturing will happen here. And then fast forward to a month later, now he went to China, and now in China he's announcing like, hey, I'm going to invest like $150 billion a year every year in the Taiwan chip maker, right? But if you think what are the reality is, that reality is what is hitting hard right now, meaning that at this point, fabrication of chips in US is doable, but can you do it in the next 6 months to a year is not possible. So that is what is driving this kind of madness where companies has to move towards China because China already has a well-established and a well-set mechanism for producing these chips. Specifically, talk about TSMC, right? That's one of the largest chip fabricator in the world, right? And they have their operations in Taiwan. They are backlogged for the next 2 years, right? So now for NVIDIA to get a special berth and a seat there, they need to start investing. They need to promise them that, hey, I'm going to buy these features or buy these productivity lines that you have. We want to buy those pipelines so that we can supply for the future. So if you combine everything that we spoke about, right? So Anthropic going to a $1 trillion company, OpenAI becoming a $1 trillion company, and then you add to it like companies like AWS and Google and Microsoft. They also need a lot of these chips. So everyone is looking towards running towards this 3 to 4 companies which are chip manufacturing. So now apart from NVIDIA being the chip technology, the fabrication and the building of the chip, like physically building the chip, has to be done by a company. That is like TSMC right now. There are a few other companies there, but I don't think we have such facilities in US. It'll take probably like a year or two for us to come to that position. So even though it's a surprise, it's no surprise because at the scale at which AI is growing, NVIDIA needs to deliver to their clients, and for them to deliver to their clients they need to be on top of the supply chain, which is like sitting right in Taiwan and like ensuring that whatever chips that are coming out of them gets into the NVIDIA factory, and then like they're able to deliver those things, right? So there are the other thing like the geopolitical angle, like I kind of like touched about it, and is the China versus US in terms of this arms race as they call it, right? Even though they are both fighting, it kind of becomes getting very more and more evident that these companies, both countries, needs to like start collaborating, because like there is one company which is able to manufacture these chips. There is like we are bringing up like frontier models, like every day we are spinning up new models, right? Even if you release like a couple of days back, like Claude released at 4.8, which is supposed to be like fantastic in terms of like the coding, right? So these kind of developments need those chips, and chips needs fabrication of chips, and they need money, and unfortunately they are in China, so the money has to go there. So that's the way I see it. What's your take on it, right? Do you think like very surprised that the money was moved there at all?
To be honest, I didn't see this news till you said to me. So after that, I did ask my ChatGPT. ChatGPT said it's not a surprise. They were already doing like 15 billion some year, couple of years ago, and 150 billion per year right now is the right track. And it just said, just be worried about geopolitics and the locational dependency. But the way I say it is, in my model, mental model, Taiwan is for hardware, India is for software. So that's how I think US is thinking. And the packaging capacity, which is interesting. You touched upon it from chip design. I think it's a $1 trillion topic which we need to dive in deep. But let's jump something fun or something very serious, of course. Pope entered the conversation with Pope always doesn't, like in sense, shy away from anything that's sensitive. When Palestine was a hot topic or when Ukraine war started, he had been always the Pope institution. The Pope role had been always very vocal about sensitive topical matters. Uh, what did he say, and how do you think this is important or changes the conversation?
Yeah, it's a very good. I mean, I'm very surprised, and also again not very surprised because like Pope Leo, since he became the new Pope, he's been outstanding, right? Like in the sense like he comes up and like touches some on topics which his predecessors have not touched, and I think this is one of them, right? So the topic being in question is like the Pope released the first ever encyclical called as Magnifica Humanitas. All right, what it really means is like it's focused on human dignity in the age of AI, which I think, like, if you look at, I don't know if you had seen some of the recent conversations that's happening in the universities. There was a convocation function where the ex Google CEO was talking about AI. The moment he uttered the word AI, the entire crowd started booing. Think about this, like top university, the students who had actually learned technology, they started booing the moment they heard about AI. So AI is creating fear, and people think that it might erase humanity. And there are multiple reasons to think about it, right? So all these job losses is triggering a lot of panic, not only at the minds of students, even like educated and like the experienced AI technology folks. They think that their jobs could be easily replaced. So we talked about Devin, like we are talking about like 90% of the coding is done by it, right? There are artificial intelligent agents that are capable of doing more than a repetitious task, and even like newer generative task that a human is not capable of doing it. So I think Pope is observing this, which is a great thing, right? So think about he being more philosophical and religious person. He is looking at the pains of the people, looking where the panic is coming from, and he thinks that he needs to provide his point of view on that one, and that's exactly what they are doing it, right? The second thing is more in terms of humanity is one of the major concerns, but not only in terms of job. He's thinking about military. In terms of military wise, most of the companies, like most of these wars right now, are pointing to AI. So if you even think about the latest Venezuelan attack that happened in from US, and then the US Iran attack, those are actually surgical strikes which took with surgical precision, right? Those makes the world uncomfortable, because these are using again, for Iran, they specifically said Anthropic's AI was used for targeting a specific location, and for targeting specific leaders and their locations, right? So those are a couple of things that I think Pope is trying to understand, and trying to do this one, right? So one is job wise, the second is military wise, what are the things doing it, right? And then that's where he thinks that human dignity is important. So because when a machine is taking over, the human ego is hit, the dignity gets dropped, and then that's where Pope is calling for it. Hey, you have AI, fantastic technology, use it, but use it with guardrails. Start thinking about guardrails. You need to think about disarming it. So the reason the moment you use the word disarming, that makes it it's like a weapon, right? So AI is today is considered like a weapon, is what people are saying. So what is happening is they are using it. They have this unbelievable capability. Can they unleash it on people, and can it destroy humanity, is what he's worried about. Again, we can talk about hey, we are not even into the next level of AI. We are still in the narrow age. We're not even getting into AGI at all. So even before that, I think it's a warning bell. You can see it either way. Why would Pope want to interfere in technology advancement, right? Most of the software Silicon Valley people, they already are speaking about against it, saying that hey, don't put guardrails now, because whenever a technology is trying to come out and emerge, if you start putting those guardrails, it will not emerge. That's what the Silicon Valley or the AI proponents are saying. But what people who are siding with the Pope is saying that hey, that's a correct quotation. There is there is not a binary answer. There should be a balance. Everything is gray, but thinking about guardrails is the right step, is what they're thinking. But what do you think, right? I know, you might be thinking, should the Pope should be worried about AI, or should we just focus on running masses from Vatican?
That's a great question. To wrap it up, my thoughts, I think Pope or anyone should be worried about, and they should evangelize a lot more about AI, because we are literally going towards this. You talked about science fiction movies, US versus China. That's happening right now. Two separate stacks, both of them asking agents to run on their own, asking their agents to run the security for them. Previously, it used to be humans. Now we know with Mythos that has completely changed for US. And so it's pretty much autonomous right now. And Devin writing 90% of its own code. So the trends, it's no longer a trend. It's the reality right this second. So Pope calling it is a good call.
Perfect. So with that said, I think we should also read about this one. There is a lot of information. At least we can distill it and see it. He talks about Algorand ethics. He talks about autonomous weapon systems and why those are dangerous and everything. So I think it's a well-written article or a well-written paper. I don't know if other churches, other denomination of churches will start releasing it. I mean, other religions will start releasing about it. But I think it's a very good step forward. So with that said, we'll wrap up. I think we covered a lot today. So again, like I said, thank you for your continued support and encouraging us with the geekJUDGE channel. We'd encourage or request you guys to share it with your friends, share it with your kids, specifically students who are into AI, right? So we are trying to demystify AI for them and try to help them to get a good career path. With that said, thank you, Bala, for joining me, and we'll wrap up episode 2. Thank you.